Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Anyreach Roundtable, where we explore how AI is transforming the way we work. I'm your host, Richard Lin, CEO of Anyreach, and today's guest is Ben, the CEO of Toybox. Ben, it's great to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Richard.
All right, awesome. So for our audience, just to get to know you a little bit better, can you maybe share a little bit about your background and experience?
Sure. I am the co-founder and CEO of Toybox, which is a very easy-to-use 3D printer aimed at the kids market. And basically, the reason why we call it Toybox is it's a bottomless toy box. You buy this 3D printer for pretty low cost, around $240. And from there, you buy this, you install it, and then kids can open an app, find whatever toys they want. We have tens of thousands of toys. They click print, and it builds that toy for them.
Got it. Well, thanks for sharing that. And how did you exactly, start your journey into Toybox?
We've been doing this for almost 10 years now, about 9 years ago, and that's when 3D printing was, first starting to make it in the market. And I remember I bought my first 3D printer at the time and played around with it with my friends, and these were supposed to be plug and play devices, and we found the learning curve to be extremely steep for them. So really what we set out to do is create a very easy to use 3D printer for just a general consumer, not a hobbyist, and not anyone that's into really complicated gadgets. And we wanted to start with the toy market, and that's or kids market as like a kind of nice protected moat, and that's really how we ended up where we are.
Got it. And then Toybox not only has like a 3D printer, but it also has kind of a digital subscription to a whole library of different types of toys. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so Toybox operates pretty differently from a standard 3D printer. Like a normal 3D printer, you really just buy this hardware device, and then you're usually connecting it to a bunch of open source programs, or even if they have their own, it's like kind of hodgepodge together. Ours is really this really clean ecosystem where the app is really like a part of the printer. So this app, we have a model where people are not actually messing with the files, right? So they go directly to the app, find a toy they want, press print. That enables like a lot of really interesting things like IP protection. So we're the only 3D printing brand that can work with major Hollywood studios and real IP. For things like Ninja Turtles and Superman and stuff like that, we can actually sell that content on the platform. A lot of what we do is we actually run a subscription service where people get free access to these toys. So I'd say the ecosystem for Toybox is really the 3D printer, the consumables that like we call it printer food, and then a subscription service. And then really just this huge content system. That content can either be toys or like a lot of creativity apps that we're kind of baking into the system now.
Got it. And then you mentioned about, protected IP and so forth, and you have some pretty amazing brands that partner with you, like DC, Universal, Warner Brothers, and even NASA. Can you maybe talk a little bit about how those deals, came about, and how is NASA playing a part in what you guys are doing?
Yeah, we actually brought on a really amazing COO that's highly connected in the entertainment industry, and he's able to kind of navigate these deals really early for us. So I probably can't say too many specifics about the details of the deal, but basically our distribution model is really interesting as a toy company, where if you look at a company like Mattel, and they sell let's say a doll for retail value of like $10. Really, they're only making something like $2 off of that, right? So, you might think 10, 20% goes to the licensors, maybe 30% goes to COGS, 40% goes towards the distributors, and then like they're left with, 10, 20% more. Ours is completely different. When someone buys a toy on the Toybox platform, it goes directly to that customer. All they do is press print. So there's no distribution. We don't pay for COGS, there's no other fees associated with it. So we're actually able to, work with the licensors pretty closely to give them a deal that they were pretty happy with, even though we're a very small company.
Got it. And it's really interesting, kind of how your product and business is built. I kind of say it's akin to like a physical Minecraft, right? Where kids can essentially create any kind of toy to their imagination on your platform. So it's super cool that you guys have that opportunity to make these toys more accessible and make it easy for the brands to essentially distribute kind of their IP. And just kind of thinking about AI in general, because obviously that's the topic of our podcast. How are you and the team at Toybox thinking about AI, especially in the
Mhm.
market?
We are releasing a pretty major part of our app this holiday season, and this is still pretty under wraps. But you can think of like a big part of 3D printing. One is obviously just being able to have the hardware to create these devices. But two, it's really the content that you bring to the system. It has to be 3D printable, and it has to be something users want. What we've been able to do is really create like these workflows for people to be able to create using AI. And the stuff is pretty phenomenal now. The speed at which things are moving is pretty incredible. So what we're releasing as a part of our subscription service, and we'll probably do this as like a higher tier item, so a higher tier subscription service, is just the ability to people to prompt things and create things through AI, full 3D models, right? So you could say, we've been able to do pretty queries that are like pretty complex, like a mouse riding a elephant on water skis, and it'll create that. So we have that. We also just have it so you can snap a picture. So if your kid draws a monster, you can take a picture of that, and it'll actually create it in 3D and have that printable. And then lastly, we have it so you can just draw in the app as well. So, this bakes really nicely into our ecosystem. Since we do have a CAD tool, you can imagine really just piecing together, almost like Legos, these creations that you're creating on the fly and manually putting it together in this 3D environment. So, you could draw like a human, you can ask it to create a humanoid cat, you can ask it to create a house, you can ask it to create a tree, and then put those all together and kind of create an environment that's 3D printable. It's really interesting where things are converging now, especially with 3D printing. The quality is getting a lot better. You're starting to be able to do multicolor and multi-material. A lot of this 3D design work is becoming a lot easier, and the quality is going up pretty immensely. But then you're seeing like new tools like NVIDIA's Part Packer that can take these 3D models and actually isolate the pieces of it. So if you have a cat, like a humanoid cat, it could change, like it could find the eyes, separate it, right, the mouth, which is really important for 3D printing when you're piecing together these pieces. But it allows for things like agentic design, where
Mm.
you can say, design me a cat holding a sword. I don't like its sword. Regenerate the sword itself. And that gets really interesting further down the line when you are doing more complicated things like, wanting to print a pair of shoes for yourself, or like create, I don't know, like a tripod for your phone stand or a phone case or something.
Yeah. You brought up a really interesting thought. There's obviously a lot of agentic AI solutions right now for like image generation, whether it's like Mid-Journey or I think like Adobe's doing it and so on and so forth. But, it sounds like Toybox is the first to actually take that concept and make it into a physical experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just images, online or even videos and so forth. Now you can actually bring that to life, which is pretty amazing. Where you can take AI and apply it to different kind of disciplines, if you will. So outside of the core product, I'm sure you and your team are looking at different AI tooling solutions, so on and so forth, to improve operations.
Mm-hmm.
How do you and the team kind of work internally to leverage AI?
It's a lot of things. I mean, I think a lot of my emails I'll have another pass, through GPT. I think it's pretty normal. I always have to try to remove the hyphens from it because I think that's a dead giveaway that it
That's
is
not you
GPT and
typing. Yeah.
ChatGPT.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a big part. But like even anything from making spreadsheets, or we've started looking into it for customer support inquiries as well.
Mm.
Which is right up your alley. Um, uh, I think just service wise, it's pretty important. So whether it is like customer support or people are just reaching out about like special deals or promotions that we're running.
Mm.
Um, Obviously, the coding side, we're starting to see our devs use that a little more. I think at first there's some resistance to trust, the output of these um, like vibe coded projects. Now I think
Mm.
things are getting a little better. Prototyping is pretty we use pretty heavily. I think, this kind of AI demo that I made, I just made that purely vibe coded, right? Really,
Mm.
really good in isolated environments. So yeah, it's really just bleeding into like every aspect of, the creative parts of the business where we're building new things operationally as well.
And you mentioned that, some of your devs on your team are vibe coding or, starting to adopt it, but they were running into a little bit of friction or maybe some bias. What are some
Mhm.
challenges that you're seeing for at least your team internally to like adopt these new AI tools?
You would have to ask them. I think the big feedback I've gotten back from them is that like the more sophisticated the project, like just the more weird errors come back, the more regressions get introduced, and I was even kind of seeing that with
Mm.
my workflows for just creating small prototypes. Obviously, uh, there's different ways to interact with the code base where you can set rules and stuff. Uh, for us, it's kind of just a balance of, how much do we want to invest learning this kind of new vibe coding technique versus what we already know,
Mm.
and how much are we going to get out of this, like, using cursor or whatever. So, yeah, there's been a balance there, but I think it's like the speed at which things are moving. It's like pretty obvious that, the vibe coded stuff is going to become much more powerful.
Yeah, yeah. And back to your core product, you mentioned something that's coming out on your roadmap of using agentic AI to essentially allow your users to create anything to their imagination, right?
Mhm.
How do you think about maybe ethics or safety or anything like that? Because AI is kind of like a double-edged sword. There's just so much potential for it to do good, but what happens if a user decides, hey, I'm gonna you know, Vibe 3D print a branded IP, which you might run into issues for, or maybe they print out something that's maybe not too kosher, right?
Yeah.
How do you think about that?
I mean, I think the child safety stuff. If we're talking about printing a gun or something, that's like pretty easy to take care of, especially if you are create like it's easier to take care of that given these AI solutions than it is, if you were doing like a CAD software, right, where people can create
Hmm.
whatever they want, and it's mainly because since things are created via like these large language models in a large part, you can use those same models to say, hey, is this child appropriate? Are they creating something illegal? So that's really simple, just like an extra query pass through. So I'm not too worried about that. I think things like licensed content, um, it can be. We're like looking into this right now. Obviously, we don't want to piss off any licensing partners, and we don't want to be making money off of licensed content. We don't want people selling licensed content. Um, if if it's not illegal and people are just creating it for themselves, you know, I I think that's actually like a kind of nice use case, but I'd have to talk to my lawyers about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty interesting topic. As we talk to other enterprises, there's always that kind of ethical safety concern, regardless
Mhm.
of what industry you're in. So, the nice thing is, a lot of the LLMs are already baked in with some of this kind of constraints, right? You can't ask
Mhm.
GPT to help you build a nuclear bomb. It's going to say, "Hey, sorry, I can't help you with
Mhm.
that." So,
Yeah.
and as you kind of think about your industry, I mean, not too familiar with the toy industry, but it seems like they're probably a little bit living still in the past. Um, how are you seeing folks in your space? You mentioned Mattel and so forth. Are they looking at AI? Has a thought of AI as a topic been an area of concern or area of interest for folks in your space?
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked to, kind of the execs at all these companies, and if you look at Mattel, I believe it was Mattel just signed a deal with OpenAI. I don't know what they're planning.
Really?
Yeah, I don't. Maybe there's dolls that have AI integrated into it. I have no idea what they're planning, but they did sign a big deal with OpenAI apparently. I know that some of these other larger toy companies, just speaking to the execs there, they have been looking into these things.
Mm.
They have been seeing a lot of AI demos and how to incorporate that into what they're building. I'm not sure how that translates to these business models, though, because if you think of someone like a Mattel or a lot of these big toy companies, their business model is really just you know one, like creating at scale, which means like injection molding these, cheap plastic items over and over again, and then two,
Mm,
distribution. It's like really a lot of what these guys do are just like large distribution companies. So if you think
mm,
about like the value of AI, a lot of it has to do with like this personal customization, right? Where, the content on our platform, before it was whatever people would create and we'd surface that to you, and then like the AI or the engine would be trying to recommend content that you would print yourself, like that you might find interesting. Where this is going is, it's going to be producing the content that you want probably before you even know it, right? And everyone's going to have a different idea of what they want, and there's probably not going to be that much crossover into like the different things that people are printing. um, so, given that, it's interesting. I think toy companies could probably use it from like a production creativity standpoint, but like once they're starting to like hit production, like the customization that AI offers at
mm.
scale for every individual user, I'm not sure how they're going to be able to leverage that unless, they're doing smart toys or something.
Right, right. I mean, they don't really have a choice once it's in production to, change the product, right? It's already kind of
Yeah.
baked in. So
Mhm.
unless they introduce a whole new type of technology or business model, I don't see how they can leverage it,
Mhm.
post-production. I was speaking with some folks at Walmart, and interesting, you're kind of wondering, okay, Walmart AI, like how does that actually work? So outside of like, obviously customer support and so forth for automation, it's more of kind of like the not sexy stuff. Like,
Mhm.
how do you optimize supply chain? Can we leverage
Mhm.
all this data that we have to find gaps, across different geos, and what's causing more cogs here, and so on and so forth, or business intelligence and things like that. So, not exactly what the consumer gets at the end, but it's
Mhm.
more for like internal business operations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I imagine that Walmart has been using some type of AI to do that for a long time now, right? Whether they're using LLMs to do it before, probably not. But there's definitely some type of sophisticated
Well,
AI.
they're probably saying it's AI, but it's like rules based, right?
Yeah,
It
yeah,
really wasn't AI at all. Massive if-then statements and scripts to
yeah.
manage. Yeah. And so, as you kind of think about, your industry in the next 3 to 5 years, whether it's the market or technology or where you guys are going,
Mhm.
what do you see in terms of what that looks like, and how's AI going to play into it?
I mean, I think 3D printing has a few components, right, that like make it very valuable to the user, and I think it's going to become more valuable. And one's like what you create, so like the materials you feed into it are a really big part of that, and then just the mechanism of creating it. Like, can it create it fast? Can it, like, can you create these products that are high quality, that don't look 3D printed?
Mm,
So there's like the kind of hard, I call that the hardware aspect of it. That's important. That's been changing pretty rapidly. Things like color printing are coming out. Things like full automation are going to come out pretty soon, right? Where you really don't have to touch the 3D printer. You can print whole things all in one pass.
mm,
Um, I think that's pretty major. And then really the other part of that is like the content side. What are you going to be able to create? And are you going to be able to create, like, find or create exactly what you want? I was using, I could use shoes as an example, right? Like maybe you wanted a print pair of shoes. Well, you can print in
mm,
rubber now. That's pretty new.
mm,
That's actually kind of taking off. People are printing all types of shoes, but you can imagine you might want a certain design, right? And there's an infinite amount of designs for shoes. And you might want it to fit exactly the contours of your foot, right? So, you could easily come up with, an agentic solution that says, oh, you want to print some shoes, scan the bottom of your foot, with the depth scanner on your phone. We'll create a topology for that, and you can describe exactly how you want your shoes, or we can generate 500, and you can pick what you want, and we'll combine the two to create you like the perfect shoe. And that's where things get really interesting, especially with 3D printing. Is really it's
mm.
the only thing that can allow for this real deep personalization and customization that no other manufacturing method can do. And where this is going is you'll be able to do this with a device that's just a few $100s.
Yeah.
And I think it's like extremely compelling where things are going. Plus, if you create it on a 3D printer, it's tariffless as well. So there's given like the political climate, that's a big
Right.
benefit.
And I think I recently saw, I think it was Google that came up with this like consumer app where you can, as you're shopping, you can like put it on, overlay it on yourself, and you can see how you
Hmm.
look with it. I mean, if you took it one step further and you click a button, say, send us the toy box and print out this dress for me, so I don't have to buy
Yeah,
it, that would be the future. That would be freaking amazing, right?
yeah.
But you kind of talked about, hardware, and there's that, I guess. Part of your business around like materials, right? You're talking about like printer food, certain types of plastics, and so forth. Do you see, AI impacting material science and like creating new types of, materials that people can play with and, hopefully print on?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why it wouldn't. I think, materials science is a lot further outside of my forte, but they're using like AI systems for protein folding and stuff. So I imagine they will be using it to, find materials that have really interesting properties. When you think about 3D printing, there's a couple variables that you can control when you're printing. That
Mm,
could be like the speed at what you're printing, the temperature at what you're printing. Um, like if you could use those variables to like change the properties of the material you're printing, so printing at a different temperature or speed yields like different softness,
mm,
or hardness, or conductivity, um, or color, right? Like the possibilities are really endless. So I think materials is something that has been growing in the 3D printing space. I think it's something that uh, uh, is kind of underappreciated in the 3D printing space, where there could be a lot more advancements if there's more investment in kind of the material science aspect of it.
got it, got it. Awesome. Well, as we kind of think about the future of 3D printing and as we think about AI, are there any companies maybe in this space, not particular to your market, that you're seeing AI applied, kind of like to 3D printing? Maybe it's on the
Mhm.
consumer side, maybe it's on the business side. Anything exciting going on there?
I think one of the more recent ones that I really enjoyed using was Gamma. That was a pretty interesting one where it kind of makes your pitch deck for you. I didn't end up using it all the way, but it's kind of interesting seeing this thing work through
Yeah,
and
I've used
trying to.
Gamma quite a bit as well, but
Yeah,
it never really hits the right amount of pixel perfect that I'm looking for.
yeah, and it's kind of
It's the
hard to
start of
find
a
it.
prototype.
Yeah, it's definitely really interesting for the prototypey stuff, which I think is kind of what I'm getting a lot from like these AI tools. Really great at prototyping, but once you have to kind
Yeah,
of get it 100%, like you really need
yeah,
to get in there and kind of do things the old-fashioned way.
yeah, yeah. All right, awesome. Well, Ben, it was a pleasure having you on Anyreach Roundtable. If the audience wants to find more of you as well as Toybox, where can they look?
Hmm, where should you look? I guess just go to toybox.com.
Got it.
Yeah.
Toybox.com and look up Ben Baltes, Baltes, on Google. I'm sure his Ben's name will show up. But all right, awesome. Well, appreciate you being on the show, and thanks again for joining.
Well, thanks, Richard. Thanks for having me.